You've seen the videos where people say, I do not consent to harm, to scarcity, to corruption. But what does that actually mean? Are you calling a lawyer? No. Are you filing paperwork? No. Then what are you doing? Revoking consent is an energetic act, not legal, not physical. Every system of control, governments, corporations, even non-physical entities, like the Archon some traditions describe, runs on one thing: your silent agreement. When you watch the news and feel helpless, that's agreement. When you pay a bill and feel trapped, that's agreement. When you believe this is just how the world works, that's the deepest agreement of all. Revoking consent is saying, I withdraw my energetic permission. You no longer have my silent yes. Does this make your problems disappear overnight? No, but it changes who you are inside the system. And when you change internally, the external has to respond. That's not magic, that's resonance. People who revoke consent daily report less fear, more clarity, strange opportunities, and a natural repulsion to things that used to drain them. You're not fighting the system. You're opting out of the frequency that powers it. So how do you do it? You say it out loud. That's it. I do not consent to harm being done in my name. I do not consent to scarcity. I do not consent to lies. Your throat must move. Your breath must carry it. That's how energy follows intention. Watch the other videos on this channel for specific declarations. Save them, say them daily, and if you're ready to start right now, comment one word: consent revoke. I'll see you in the next one. Specific declarations for harm, scarcity, corruption, and more. Link in bio. Watch this before the declaration. I do not consent to any system, legal, economic, or energetic, that violates Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. I do not consent to being kept in survival mode so I cannot reach love, belonging, or self-actualization. My basic needs are not a privilege. They are not a bargaining chip. I withdraw consent from any structure that profits from my scarcity. Say it with me: I do not consent. Revoking consent equals withdrawing your energetic permission. You don't need anyone's approval to say no to harm. The system runs on your silent agreement. This breaks it. I do not consent to corruption in my government, in my workplace, in my spiritual community, or in my own heart. I do not consent to bribery disguised as lobbying. I do not consent to justice sold to the highest bidder. Any oath sworn in bad faith has no power over me. I revoke consent. Every corrupt hand that has ever touched my reality without my knowing. Say it: I do not consent. Corruption has no authority over me. Consent to harm entering my body through medicine, through food, through water, through air, through energy, through intention, or through force. My body is not public property. My health is not a laboratory. No needle, no pill, no procedure, no protocol enters me without my conscious, informed, revocable permission. And that permission is withdrawn today. Say it out loud: I do not consent to invasion of my health. My body equals my jurisdiction. I do not consent to scarcity. Not in my bank account, not in my opportunities, not in my mind. Scarcity is a lie programmed into a planet of abundance. I revoke consent from every algorithm, every policy, every belief system that tells me there is not enough. There is enough. I am enough. And I do not consent to being convinced otherwise. Say it: I do not consent to scarcity. Scarcity is a lie. Abundance is natural. I do not consent to harm against children, against infants, against teens, against the elderly, and against the unborn. Not in my name, not through my silence, not through my tax dollar, not through my distracted attention. The most vulnerable among us are not collateral damage. They are the measure of a society's soul. I withdraw consent from any system that harms them, directly or through neglect. Say it. I do not consent to the harm of the vulnerable. The vulnerable are not collateral. I do not consent to war, not fought in my name, not funded with my resources, not justified by my fear. War is not a patriotism. War is the failure of imagination dressed in uniform. I revoke consent of every general, every president, every corporation that profits from bodies burning. Peace is not naive. Peace is the only sane response to an insane system. Say it. I do not consent to war. War does not have my permission. I do not consent to lies. Not the small ones, not the ones dressed as news, not the ones whispered in my ear by fear. I do not consent to gaslighting that tells me what I see with my own eyes is not real. My perception is valid, my discernment is sharp, and I withdraw consent from every false narrative designed to make me doubt myself. Say it. I do not consent to deception. Truth is not negotiable. I do not consent to greed that starves children while warehouses rot with food. I do not consent to entrapment, debt systems designed to keep me running on a wheel I never agreed to. No one works 40 hours a week to deserve shelter. That is not law, that is a spell, and I break it now. Say it. I do not consent to the trap. The trap is a spell. Spells can be broken. I do not consent to any political agenda, left, right, center, or manufactured, both sides that places power above people. I do not pledge allegiance to any flag that waves over suffering. My loyalty is to life, to truth, to the monad fragment in every being. Politicians serve themselves unless we revoke consent. Today, I revoke it. Say it. I do not consent to false choices. No flag over my soul. I do not consent to interdimensional harm, to archons, to energetic parasites, to any non-physical entity that feeds on my fear, my trauma, or my attention. This body is a temple. This field is a fortress, and no being, seen or unseen, enters without my invitation. I revoke all prior contracts made in sleep, in ignorance, or under duress. Say it. I do not consent to interdimensional harm. My field is not a feeding ground. I do not consent to poisoned air, to contaminated water, to chemically altered food, to the criminalization of shelter. These are not luxuries. These are the 4 pillars of a human life. Any system that profits from making them scarce or toxic has no authority over me. I reclaim my right to breathe, to drink, to eat, and to rest without permission from any corporation. Say it. I do not consent to the commodification of survival. Survival is not a commodity. I do not consent to isolation. I do not consent to the lie that I must go alone. I consent to community. I consent to love. I consent to mutual aid, to shared meals, to holding space for grief and joy alike. The system wants me to autonomize, scrolling, comparing, alone. I say no. I choose connection. I choose we. Say it. I consent to love. I do not consent to loneliness. We heal together or not at all. I do not consent to harm against nature, not the clear cutting of ancient forests, not the poisoning of rivers, not the extraction that leaves mountains hollow and communities sick. The earth is not a resource. She is a relative. She is the body that holds every body I have ever loved. I revoke consent from any corporation, any government, any system that treats living land as dead capital. I do not consent to the silence of the trees being ignored any longer. Say it with me. I do not consent to harm against nature. Earth is not a resource. She is a relative. I do not consent to extraction. Trees are not silent. I do not consent to harm against the unborn, against the not yet here, against the generations who will inherit the air, water, and stories we leave behind. Every child not yet born has a right to a world that is not already on fire. I revoke consent from any decisions made today in boardrooms, in parliaments, in secret, that mortgages their future for our convenience. Say it. I do not consent to stealing from the unborn. The unborn cannot consent for themselves. So I revoke consent on their behalf. I am an ancestor in training. According to the Algonquin spiritual teachings carried by Jacob Owiti, there are 7 nations, not countries, but living peoples of this earth. The 2-legged humans, the plant nation, the insect nation, the 4-legged nation, the water beings nation, the winged ones nation, and the 7th, Mother Earth herself, Turtle Island. I do not consent to harm against any of these 7 nations. Not one. I do not consent to the destruction of the plant nation through clear cutting and poison. I do not consent to the disappearance of the insect nation through chemicals and indifference. I do not consent to the suffering of the 4-legged, the water beings, or the winged ones. And I do not consent to the violation of Mother Earth, the turtle who carries us all. These nations do not belong to us. We belong to them. Say it with me. I do not consent to harm against any of the 7 nations. The 7 nations, 2-legged, plant, insect, 4-legged, water, winged, Mother Earth. We belong to them, not they to us. I do not consent. I do not consent. I am not Indigenous. I do not speak for any nation, any tribe, any council, any elder, or any person. But I can revoke my consent to the systems that have harmed Indigenous peoples for centuries and continue to harm them today. I do not consent to broken treaties. I do not consent to stolen land. I do not consent to the removal of children. I do not consent to the erasure of languages, ceremonies, and sacred sites. I do not consent to the lie that this land was empty. I do not consent to the lie that discovery equals ownership. I do not consent to the lie that colonialism ended. It only changed uniform. I stand as a witness, not a savior, not an ally unless Indigenous people name me as one. Just a witness who says the original caretakers have never surrendered their spiritual authority. Say it if you mean it. I do not consent to colonial harm, past, present, or future. I am not Indigenous. I do not speak for any nation, but I revoke consent to the systems that harm them. Witness, not savior. The original caretakers have never surrendered.